All right, guys. So we just filmed the episode that you're about to watch. This conversation is going to start off with a baseline understanding of what manipulation looks like, what judgment looks like, and then we are going to get into the conversation of corn addiction. I feel the need to give you this little disclaimer before getting into the episode. This conversation is nothing more than Peaches and I having free-flowing discussion back and forth about a Zoom call that we got, making up hypothetical situations, and trying to get a deeper understanding so that we can help people further when they reach out to us. The topic of corn addiction has become very mainstream. It's become very overstated, oversimplified, and I think that this is now starting to fall under the line of calling somebody a narcissist because you don't like their behavior. I hope that you enjoy this episode, and I apologize if the beginning of this is chopped up. We didn't think the conversation was going to go as the way that it did, but we both feel that it was a very productive conversation, and we hope you enjoy it. And we are back.
We're back, bumble bitches.
I realize when we do these back-to-back episodes, there's 2 weeks in a row where we're in the same thing, and when I clip them, it's very confusing to the viewers.
Oh, I bet it is.
Yeah, I probably should have changed my shirt or something, or brought you a different blanket.
Maybe.
Oh well, we live and we learn.
Yeah.
We are going to be doing a non-podcast episode today where we are going to be talking about manipulation and judgment. And we're going to look at a few situations and just have a discussion about it. This might not be a very long episode. This could be one of the shortest episodes we ever do. I don't know. But I want to talk about a couple things because we were having a conversation today in the gym, Sean and I were, about what positive affirmations look like. And on this podcast, we have been very adamant about making sure that you tell your person, I'm proud of you. I love you. You're doing great as a dad, or you're a kick-ass mom. Thank you for going to work today, right? We are very big on positive affirmations, showing gratitude, and serving each other. All of that is manipulation. And that was the conversation that him and I were having, because it is no different than training a dog or a child.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a child who doesn't want to do what they're supposed to be doing, and you tell them, well, you're the one who has to deal with the consequences, so if you don't do your homework and you fail and you're 15 in third grade, this is your problem, right? Although that does affect the parent. Like that's not who we're supposed to be as adults. We're supposed to be training our kids to be decent human beings. It does give them the ability to learn to live a life free of judgment or manipulation, because you're allowing them to live from the consequences of their actions. So we learn as children to behave based off the manipulation or positive affirmations of our parents, depending on how you want to word it. When you say manipulation, it has a negative undertone to it.
Well, it's what people assigned to it.
Right. But if you say positive affirmations, you don't assign that to manipulation, even though that it is.
It is.
Dakota is training our dog, and he did a lot of the beginning training with food. So when she would do something right, she could eat and give a little bit of, hand feed the food. Everything was done from hand. So she started equating positive behavior to survival. So if she sits when she's told, she can eat. If we do something like go to work and we are trying to do the right thing and our partner says, hey, I'm really proud of you for doing those things, the gratitude behind that is what matters. But that can be used to manipulate us to want us to do more. And I think that we should have a discussion about that. And then I think we should have a discussion about what judgment looks like, and we can even go as far as trauma.
Okay.
And look at the way we assign things individually to said situations.
Okay.
You first.
On what?
We don't have notes.
No, I'm here to be a part of your conversation.
I wanted to have this conversation because I wanted to see how you would listen or agree or disagree with some of these thoughts.
Okay.
Mainly the positive affirmations thing being manipulation.
It is.
You just agree with it.
Yeah, I do.
Well, we're done, guys. That was cool.
I learned very early on as a child, I could manipulate to get what I want. If I ask mom a question while she's half asleep, she'll almost always say yes. And then when I get in trouble, well, I asked you.
Right.
Manipulation. As I became older, I recognized that you attract more bees with honey. And that's what I want in my life. I want sunshine and rainbows and big, strong man with tree trunks for legs. And in order to do that, you need to be a ray of sunshine 80% of the time.
Okay, so knowing that positive affirmations can be used as a way of manipulating people to get them to do what you want them to do. We know that manipulation can be forms of control, because if you are somebody who makes others walk on eggshells around you, you are manipulating the people around you to conform to the things that you want them to do, right? There are people who use the victim mentality. They use their trauma. They use their mental illnesses to manipulate others in those moments. When it comes to manipulation, because that word has such a negative overtone to it, do you think that there's ever a time where you can use that in a positive light?
Manipulation?
Yep.
Hostage negotiations.
That is manipulating. It absolutely is.
Yeah.
But that's not positive to call it manipulating the people you're negotiating.
But that is what's happening. You want to keep the situation as calm as possible. You're going to use certain phrasing. You're going to use certain tones.
But if you call it manipulating, the people that are holding the hostages are not going to let them go because they're going to get mad they're being manipulated.
Right, of course they are. Oh, so it denounced to the person,
Yeah.
I'm manipulating you right now. Okay. It would have to be in a joking manner. It's because there is such a negative tone to manipulation, is because that's what people have assigned to it.
So that would speak on cognitive bias, right?
Right.
Okay. So you're right. It is the meaning that we assign to the word because we view that as a negative thing.
Yeah.
If you were altering things around you to get what you want, you are manipulating. You can even call it manipulating your environment, right? So even in a joking manner, if somebody did something like, if you were like, you're so fucking smart when you do blah, 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 and then I do blah, 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 and you're like, ha, manipulated you, but you're still smart when you do it. Like, I'm like, you fucking bitch. Like,
that would be the moment, though. That would be exactly what I do.
Yeah.
It would be like, you get it out of the shower and you do that thing that I like, and then I react and be like, yeah, that's right. You keep doing it with my manipulation tactics. That's right. Yeah.
Yep.
Because you want to see my reaction, because you like making me happy. And I like you doing things that make me happy.
Right. And so that is manipulation. Okay. So let me backpedal a little bit. The reason that I want to have this conversation is because the more you understand human psychology and control and manipulation and what narcissism actually is, and you understand to read between the lines, it changes the way that you interact with people. I have more empathy in my life now than I've ever had before, ever. Because I no longer take people's words at face value.
Yeah.
Ever. Like
everybody's fibbing about something.
Even with my best friends. Like Sean is one of the most genuine people that I've ever met when it comes to me. Like, he knows he can hurt my feelings. I'm not going to get mad about it. But when he says things to me, I'm questioning everything now.
Yeah.
And I probe like I've never probed. We're not talking about butt stuff. Not that kind of probes.
To probe where one has never probed before.
Yeah. I want to understand on a more deeper level, because the more I understand the situation or the person or the feelings, the better I can understand what drives people. And it makes me a better man, because I'm no longer just listening to the superficial nonsense. Even if I do get frustrated at it, I'm still trying to understand why.
Right.
We can even add the conversation of porn addiction to this.
Okay.
Because that falls into blame, shame, judgment,
Yeah.
Manipulation. We will absolutely add on to that. That'll get us to the hour mark for sure. So now that we understand manipulation, we can move on to judgment.
Okay.
So let's look at what judgment is. When people are having a conversation, you ever get really nice and crispy, nice and double baked peach pie,
Oh, yeah.
right? You do that all the time.
All the time. I'm going to do it after this.
When I get like that, I feel like everyone is judging me, and I feel like I can't fuck up.
Yeah.
I'm going to send this text message that's 4 words. I'm going to read it 19 times before I send it to make sure that everything is spelled right. It's spaced properly. Punctuation's there. And I don't ever do that in my real life. It can be wrong. I can send the word wrong, and not even bother to correct it. Like, they know what I mean.
Right.
But when I'm like that, I'm not, because I'm so concerned about judgment.
Right.
If somebody goes, hey, those glasses look really great on your face, they're judging you.
Mm-hmm.
That is them passing judgment on your appearance.
It's just a compliment.
But in a positive manner. It is a compliment because they told you.
Right.
The compliment of that looks good on you is the compliment, but the judgment was they think those glasses look good on your face.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody likes your hair, they think you're beautiful. That is a judgment that they are passing. That is another word that we put such a negative tone on, because when somebody's judging you, there's a negative consequence that comes from that judgment, when that's not always the case. I really like those shoes. The judgment is, those shoes are dope as fuck. You bought them. You're cool as fuck.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a bad thing, but that is still passing judgment. And for people who are like, I don't judge people, you're full of shit. Everyone does it within the first 30 seconds of meeting people, which is why they say you can't make there's no second chance to make a first impression, because that first 30 seconds tells you a lot about the people that you're engaging with.
Mm-hmm.
So the judgment aspect of things is also something that I think people need to be more aware of. And I think that if you can be aware of the judging of things, it changes the way that you interact with people. I
agree with that.
If you don't want to be judgmental, the you statements are going to go away quite a bit, because using a you statement is a judgment.
Mm-hmm.
You're setting something in stone that person did. You are passing judgment for a you statement. If you are making an I statement, you are still passing judgment on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You are speaking in definites. I did blah, 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 or I feel. Those are all your truth. Because it's the way that you're perceiving things. It's still a judgment, but it's on you instead of another person. So it's a lot easier to have a conversation that way. What was the other thing we were going to talk about?
Porn addiction.
Yeah, no, I know, but there was something else. Manipulation, judgment,
shame, guilt.
No, I think it was just manipulation and judgment.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into the corn addiction thing then. Now that we understand manipulation can be very simple things, judgments can be very simple things. The other night we did a Zoom call for our Patreon where we were talking to someone who had a corn addiction.
It was a couple.
We were going to start doing debriefs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that dude does not have a corn addiction.
Yeah, after processing and really after processing and really digesting the conversations that were had and the way that things were phrased, way that things were conducted, I came to the same consensus.
Why?
Because an addiction is something that is all consuming.
Yeah.
Right? We discussed it earlier. When you're sitting at work and you are counting down the seconds to go home and do whatever it is that needs to be done, and you're not going to be okay until that happens, I view that as more of the addiction.
Okay, so let's look at this from not spanking the boy or double clicking the mouse.
Okay.
If you are an alcoholic,
Mm-hmm.
or you get dope sick, or you're addicted to pills, it doesn't matter if you're at work. If you need to scratch that itch, you're going to. There are people who bring alcohol to work. There are people who bring pills and coke to work, and they do their drugs on the job.
Yeah.
Because they are an addict. There are people who probably actually have corn addiction who will go to the bathroom with their AirPods on and fucking rub one out in the bathroom at work. I would imagine that that's a thing. But that call was not what was happening.
No.
What I got from that call is that there is a lack of attention, and there was a void that dude was looking to fill. And I don't think that comes from an addiction.
Right.
And I think that he's convinced himself that he has a corn addiction, when what's really going on in his life is that there is an inferiority complex.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that because of the conversation between the two of them. He took a lot of accountability and took all of her accountability as well, right?
Yeah.
And made it about him and not what she was doing.
Yeah.
But there was a couple things that were said in the call, and one of them was that she had been tired and not feeling well for a few days, and he was trying to get some attention from her sexually, and she just wasn't having it. So he went and took care of himself. And like, you can talk about that being selfish. You can absolutely pass that judgment. That was a selfish thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was. That's not a fuck you judgment. That was the way that I view this situation. And I don't think he's wrong or she's wrong in that situation. He felt selfish. He needed something that wasn't being met from the person that's supposed to be that person for him. Mm-hmm. So he found another way that is still not right, but is much better than cheating,
Yeah.
physically cheating, finding another person to confide in or whatever. So while we get these emails all the time about men or women who are constantly watching things and taking care of themselves, I do think that the discussion needs to be, is it actually an addiction, or are their needs not being met? And those needs being that important to them that they're willing to do things outside of their relationship to get those needs met.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean that we should be passing judgment. I think that we need to be understanding what's happening. I also think that both of those scenarios can be a manipulative thing.
Yeah.
So, for example, a woman who withholds because she's not having all of her intimacy met.
Emotionally, let's say.
Right. She's manipulating by withholding to get them to conform to the things that she wants them to do before she satiates whatever need they have. For people who are not willing to play that game, that are willing to go to corn and just take care of themselves, that breakdown then becomes a bitter altercation because one tried to manipulate, the manipulation didn't work. The other person said, hey, I don't have to deal with this. And they went and took care of themselves. The manipulation has failed. The judgment now becomes prevalent. How dare you do that?
Right.
I'm supposed to be your person. I'm supposed to be able to fulfill those needs. Well, you're not fulfilling those needs. Well, I'm tired. Well, body autonomy. All of these conversations that become had just muddies the water instead of the real conversation of, look, I understand you were tired, but I'm still somebody who has needs met, and I needed that in the moment. I understand that men get different things from sexual activity than women do. There's a lot more of an emotional connection there for women than there is for men, and I do believe that to be true. I think that I'm not saying that corn addiction is not real, because I believe that there's addictions of all facets. There are people who eat fucking mattress foam, right? There are addictions of all fucking shapes and forms. But I think that that situation was a matter of lack of needs being met on her part and refusing to meet his needs because of it, and his selfishness going, well, if they're not going to do it, I'm going to do it myself.
Or it's easier to do it this way than try to figure out what's wrong with her.
That's actually another conversation that I want to have. So are we in agreement on that so far?
Yeah, I wanted to add on, I think it's also leaning towards the corn addiction when it's really not the corn addiction is a way to escape accountability and what's actually going on within the person. So it's either to say I'm addicted to corn versus I'm no longer attracted to you.
Okay. That actually is prevalent to other things that I wanted to bring up. So let's talk about that first. I forgot the other one already.
I have it.
Okay. On the lack of attraction thing, this falls into, I guess, no, the other one was the attractiveness, right? No, the attractiveness.
No, the other one was it's easier to turn to corn than versus trying to figure out what's wrong with her.
Okay, so both of those tie in together then. Because in the event that you fall out of attraction to your person, that doesn't necessarily mean physically. You could still look at them and think they're absolutely gorgeous, but their mouth has muddied that or poisoned that well, and you don't want to drink that water anymore because of it. So that could be a thing that would fall under the attraction aspect. And the other aspect of it was the easier to just take care of yourself than to do something about it. Because in order for either one of those things to be resolved, there has to be a conversation. And if the conversation is going to be about what I need to do and not about what we need to do, there's no point in having the conversation, because if one person is the only one that's willing to change, that's slavery.
It is.
Let me just do everything that you want me to do so that you have full control over our lives. I'll become a shell of a person and just do what you tell me to do. That doesn't sound like teamwork. So how does that get resolved? And let's say that situation, not speaking on these two, but that was the scenario. What if dude is still very attracted to the woman and just thinks she's gorgeous, which is why he's still trying to initiate. And whatever her shortcomings are in the relationship, she constantly turns him down. Where does the repair start in that? How do you start to overcome that? Especially if she's not telling him why she's turning him down. Because we hear, I have a headache.
Right.
I'm cramping right now. Nobody ever goes, I'm not interested in you today because you talked to me like shit yesterday and I'm not over it. Right? Like that conversation never gets had ever because it's going to start a bigger fight.
Right.
So people suppress what's really going on and make excuses and lie because it's a fucking lie. So how does the repair happen to get back to that initial point? It's a lot.
It is a lot. I would actually, I would have to really sit down and think about that. So putting myself in the position of the person who is making up excuses, there's a lot of emotional hurt going on. There would have to be a lot of feeling of not heard happening. So I would have to navigate my own negative emotions and not push that bias onto the conversation. And I would really have to figure out a gentle startup to that. As the person who is being shut down multiple times, I would have to navigate feeling like I'm unattractive, like I am no longer desirable, I'm not beautiful, I'm not sexy. It would be a whole worth of low self-esteem that I would have to navigate. And I would have to figure out a way to bring up that conversation without imposing all of the hurt that I'm feeling in it.
I have a whole lot going in my brain right now. So what do you say to the people who are like, just because we're married doesn't mean they can have it whenever they want? Because that's an argument that we see all the time when we have these conversations, and that's never the argument that we're making.
Right.
That's never what we're actually saying. We're saying that if your partner has needs and you're their person, it's your duty to make sure that their needs are met. And that doesn't just mean sex. It means that everybody is fed and that the kids have clothes and the mortgage payment's paid and car payments are paid and oils are changed and, you know, the house is not fucking in disrepair. Those needs have to be met. Like you were working as a unit. So all of a sudden, because sex becomes one of those topics, now there's a problem there because of body autonomy, right? So where does that fall into it? And speaking on the manipulation and judgment, just so I don't lose the thought, if I know that you're going through something and I've tried to make several advances and you continue shutting them down, is it acceptable to go, I'm sorry that you're going through something, but I have needs that need to be met, so I'm going to go lock myself in the bathroom until I'm done. Don't come in the bedroom. Because that would be conceived as manipulation if you believe that it is your duty to serve your person. So where does that fit?
So in both scenarios that you gave, I think that there would have to be a conversation of, look, you've turned me down the last 3 times I've asked you. This isn't going to work for me. If we've been married for 10 years, in the last 2 years, sex has been very sporadic and not what it was before, there needs to be alternatives figured out, especially if the other person is just unwilling to budge on the stance of we're not having sex anymore and I'm not going to give you a reason.
Okay, so what are the alternatives then?
Corn.
Becomes acceptable,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Subscribing to OnlyFans could be a conversation that's brought up. It could be friends with benefits if people want to go that way. It could be multiple avenues that people can take.
So you're not subscribing to one outcome. You're saying that there needs to be alternatives and you guys need to figure that out.
I think it needs to be discussed on what everybody's comfortable with, yeah. I think if someone comes forward and says, look, I'm going to go to OnlyFans and that's the only option I'm giving you because you're not giving me what I want, that's a problem because that's also control.
Right. Yeah, it falls into manipulation.
Yeah.
So then what happens if there's not resolution? What happens if all of these things are laid out and the person who has been withholding refuses to allow any of that to happen? What if to compound on that, what if they are still in love and they don't want to sleep with other people, but they one of them needs sexual release and they're not willing to compromise. And one of the people that the one withholding says, if you do any of these things, we're done. Because that adds the same level of control as saying, I'm going to go to OF and you can do nothing about that.
Then I would say, okay, if that's your stance on it, you're going to withhold this type of intimacy from me and then tell me I have no other outlet. That is on the same cusp as chaining somebody to a bed and say, you can't leave this room.
Yeah.
Like that is a mental handcuff. And I think that can be debilitating to somebody's mental state.
I truly believe that sex is weaponized in marriages.
Oh, yeah.
I truly do, especially when there are people who have a very high sex drive in that marriage and they realize that they can get what they want by withholding. And I'm not saying that the people that we talked to, this conversation was only inspired by the Zoom call that we did. This is not about them.
Yeah, this is just...
I just need to clarify that. That's not what we're doing. We are taking the topic of the Zoom call. Excuse me, yes. And she said, and running with it. I don't know if you heard it over the sneeze, but I think there's another one coming.
Bless you.
There's so much to this.
Yeah.
I think that I don't think that the term corn addiction should be thrown around like narcissism
I
or
agree with that.
narcissist is. And I believe it's becoming just a blanket statement for somebody who is not willing to submit to their person's lack of desire. Because knowing that I can do something on my own, if you're not willing to help me do it, I can just do it. And that's normal in a lot of things. If it was, hey, I need help with the yard work. Will you weed eat and edge while I cut and blow? And you're like, yeah, sure. And then you don't. And I end up doing it all. The resentment is on me for doing it all. If the sexual instigation is there, like we start flirting in the morning and we fuck around all day with dirty text messages, and then at night you withdraw and shut me down, it's no different than the yard work. I can do the yard work by myself. I was looking for help, right? The only difference is now there's no intimacy involved in that, and I'm going to an outside source, which is just going to destroy the ability for us to actually have intimacy later, because I'm now removing that emotional attachment from the deed. You know, if you have sex with somebody, if there's like something behind it, or if it's just a doing. I think that matters. I think that you're going to find yourself in a position, if you constantly withdraw and they constantly go to the outside stimulant, where the emotional attachment's going to be withdrawn, and the actual activity between the two of you will never feel the same again. I had to blow my nose now. So knowing what we know about manipulation and judgment, because of the way we open this conversation and the way that we've talked about what corn addiction actually is in terms of addiction, at what point do you think it would be acceptable to tell your person, like, I feel like sex has become weaponized, and that I believe it's being used to manipulate me? Because there was not a single you statement in that. This is how I feel about our sex life. The need is this needs to be fixed.
Right.
Because this is important to me. How does that conversation come about, and when do you have it?
I would say after the next time the shutdown happens.
Like right after, or a day later, like in the moment?
Well, I would imagine to say that I feel like I'm being manipulated is over time. You're not going to say that the first time it happens. So there has already been predated instances of, okay, this happens and then X, Y, and Z happens. And when she asks me for something, she initiates, or she accepts my
Advances.
That's the word. Thank you. So it would be after the next time the shutdown happens, or the next time that it's offered in exchange for a $500 shopping spree. I'd be like, look, I appreciate the advancement if that's the scenario where she's looking to exchange something. I have noticed a pattern and I've begun feeling X, Y, and Z, however you phrased it. Or this is the 8th time I've initiated, or I've tried to initiate with you and you shut me down. And I've also noticed a pattern of when you want something, we have sex. And I'm beginning to feel like sex is being weaponized. And of course, there's going to be a blow up and a massive, oh, you're accusing me of things and I have body autonomy. And
I think that those conversations, even if they become a blow up, needs to happen.
I agree.
Where do you think... Okay, so let's say that conversation happens and the argument comes back as, well, I feel the way I feel and you don't have a right to my body. Do Do you think it's acceptable to be like, then I'm going to go find somebody else that's going to meet those needs? Like, do you think that's an acceptable statement like that?
Yes, and I would also say stop expecting an exchange when you do try to initiate. Like, sex is now off the table completely. Do you remember in Orange is the New Black when Aleda gets out of jail and she starts dating one of the correctional officers?
Oh, yeah.
And she only has sex with him to get what she wants? Yeah. That whole situation just came to my mind.
Right. Well, see, and that's a very, very obvious scenario.
Yeah, it is.
Right. I do believe that sex is weaponized with a lot of people. I believe that sex is manipulation on a lot of aspects, period. So much so that if I'm trying to express to you that I love you, and the only way that I know how to show you how intimately and deeply I love you is to lay with you, the act of laying with you is me manipulating you to understand. It's me trying to show you, and that's the only way I know how to do it. So I'm manipulating the situation for you to understand how intimate I love you, right? Wording it that way, it sounds stupid. It really fucking sounds stupid, but I think that that's actually a fair statement.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know that that's also an extreme because not everybody does that. I think that the mental aspect of sex is just as important as the physical. I don't, maybe because you and I are so open with the way that we talk to each other about sex, and neither one of us have ever disagreed that is your duty as your partner to make sure that those needs are met, that I don't see anything wrong with expecting that from your person.
Right.
You know, when you first started dating, when anybody first starts dating, I said you, and I didn't mean you, I meant them. When everyone first starts dating, if the understanding is a monogamous relationship and sex is happening regularly, that sets the tone for a normal engagement of sexual activity in our relationship because we are monogamous to each other. I also think that's a very fair judgment of the situation. I also understand that as life comes and stress comes, the attraction, the lust fades a little bit for people, and they're not willing to try as hard to get the engines going, or however you want to word that. At some point, though, you have to be willing to accept the fact that if you are not willing to uphold the agreements of what a monogamous relationship entails, you can't be upset when your person starts going to OnlyFans or Corn, or even starts talking to other people to get those needs met because you are failing to provide that to them.
Or you're making the choice not to.
Right. And that doesn't mean a once in a while thing. Every
Right.
once in a while, if your stomach's upset, that's fine. I get that. But if there's been 5 advancements and 4 advancements have been shut down because of headaches, touched out, long day, whatever, I don't know. You've always said that instead of trying to have a discussion about playtime, try to have like kissy faces for a little while and like suck face. Do your teenage thing and try to like get the juices flowing, because sometimes that works, and that maybe that I'm tired isn't as tired as you think it is. We've had those days.
Yeah.
I've laid down and be like, oh, I'm fucking exhausted. And you'll roll over and touch me. And then like, you'll be like, okay, well, that's not responsive. And then a few minutes later, I'm like, no, bitch, you're not rolling over. Like, I've been laying
planted the seed.
laying here dwelling on it. And that fucking seed has grown. God damn it. We're fucking doing the thing. Right. So like it happens.
Yeah.
I don't know. I understand that life gets busy and sometimes you just want to decompress and become a puddle on the couch. But if the person that you're with is not being a puddle on the couch and they have energy and they want these things and you're denying them, that is a conversation that has to be had.
Yeah.
I never thought that we would be having a conversation on this topic from this standpoint because of the emails we get.
Right.
I also think that this ties in pretty heavily into how the podcast has changed our views on things, because things are not black and white ever. They're never cut and dry. There's always so much more happening. And when we did that Zoom call, we were listening to what they were saying and taking it at face value,
Right.
because it's all you can do. especially if you don't know people and you can't see them because we didn't have the video up. Although I think we should start doing Zoom calls with video so we can see the people.
See the body language.
Even if we don't use it for people to see them, we should be able to see them. But I see the man in that, and from that conversation specifically, literally holding all of the weight of the things she was doing as his own.
Like it was his fault.
Right. And that's the difference between extreme accountability and taking blame for things. And every time we came to a topic where she had hand in things, he made it about him to not put the blame on her.
To not make her angry.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, not hurt her in any way. I guess anger it works.
Well, that was his thing. He was fearful of her becoming angry. He didn't want to
Oh, he said that, didn't he?
He did.
He did say that. Yes, he did.
I made sure to ask that specifically because that's a big deal to me. There are certain things in my life that I will avoid saying to certain people because I know what their reaction will be. And I am not willing to deal with that reaction. It is not worth, the risk isn't worth the reward for me.
So then do you think that, okay, I guess maybe that's me really reaching. I was going to say, do you think that that implies a level of safety? But I guess it doesn't really matter because...
What do you mean a level of safety?
Because here's how my brain works. You said what you said, and I immediately equated it to the conversation that we were having beforehand, which made me think about the people on the Zoom call, right? Which made me think about the things that he said. So that's where that train of thought went, bam, 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 bam.
Okay.
And then it happened in a half a second. Now I'm here. So now I'm having a conversation with you about what I just thought about.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's about what you said.
Okay.
So in that, knowing that, do you think that that is a matter of safety on his part because he doesn't feel safe in talking to his person?
100%.
So when I was going to ask you that is, do you think that speaks on safety?
Well, I was going to say, I mean, yes, in a way, because it is selfish of me to withhold that information purely because I don't want to deal with the reaction.
Right. Well, now the reason I stopped myself from saying that because I knew where my thought process was.
Yeah.
Yours may not have been there.
Yeah, right.
But if you don't want to listen to some snarky ass remark from somebody, that's just you not wanting to deal with somebody's bullshit. That's a very different conversation of safety. So
yeah.
brain.
Communication, guys.
That's why I stopped myself from going down that travel.
That was a good call.
Because we would have not ended up on the same thing.
Yeah.
There needs to be a level of I can trust you, right? We talk about that a lot on this podcast. There have been times where we have said things to each other that was not meant to be divisive or hurtful in any way, that the other person has taken it that way. And that's going to happen. And the prime example of that is what just happened in the conversation. You made a statement and I went down the train of thought to get to where I needed to be to respond to you.
Yeah.
And had I responded, your response would have been very different than what I was intending to talk about. Then you have the back and forth of trying to figure out why you're not on the same conversation. Well, if I wouldn't have explained why I was saying that, you would have never got it. We would have never been able to work through that. And if I didn't trust that we could have that conversation to get to that point to work through that, I would just get frustrated because you don't understand.
Or you're not willing to understand.
Right. You would get frustrated because you're repeating yourself and I don't fucking understand. And now we can't talk to each other. So the next time we try to have a conversation, well, what's the point? She's not going to fucking get it anyway. She doesn't listen. Right?
Yeah.
Because that's the argument. I have to repeat myself all the fucking time because he doesn't listen to me when I tell him blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Is that really the case? Do you guys just not get to the same level of understanding that allows you to come to resolve? Like, so I'm back on this whole thing, right? The whole point of all of that was to bring up the whole, at some point, there has to be an understanding of what they are doing is not okay. She's not okay for withholding. And he's not okay for watching porn. But if they're not willing to have the conversation of my needs aren't being met, either one of them, so before anybody says anything about, well, he doesn't have a right to her body, if her intimacy levels are depleted because her needs aren't being met and she's not willing to articulate that because, well, I'm tired or I have a headache, you guys are lying to each other. You're manipulating each other to just get out of the situation because you both are having something you don't want to deal with. Where does that resolution come into play? Where do you finally just go, enough is enough, and either have the conversation or break things off and just do whatever you want to do? And if you do what you want to do because the conversation has kind of been had, are you in the wrong for taking care of yourself?
No. If the conversation has been had and it was a beat around the bush conversation and there was no real clear definition of what was going on, if the conversation was broached of, you're not willing to be intimate with me anymore, I'm going to watch corn, and the response was a beat around the bush, I'm going to take that as a yes.
Okay.
Because you didn't say that you were willing to step your game up. You didn't tell me that you're going to be pissed off if I do it. You said whatever, or fine, or okay.
What if they actually said they would be mad about it though, and then continue to withhold?
Then there would be discussions of this isn't long term.
Okay.
Because when we got together or we got married, you catfished me. Not doing this.
So let's reverse it then.
Okay.
Right? Because this has been a conversation about corn, but let's talk about it on an intimacy level.
Okay.
Because we harbor a lot of, you don't go to the opposite sex about your problems and emotionally cheat. But what if the opposite is of her not having the emotional needs met or intimacy needs met from him for whatever the reason is? The conversation is had and he's like, you don't get to do that. And she's like, well, then fix it. And he doesn't. When does it become okay for her to then reach out to try to fulfill that need? Because it's still a need that needs to be met.
I don't think that need can be met outside of a romantic relationship without there be actual cheating and feelings involved being developed over time. And I think, well, that can be said for the other thing around. I think it's more of a slippery slope when it comes to emotional needs versus sexual needs. Because when there is a deep bond formed and that falls into the provision for me when it comes to men.
Oh, you have to deep dive that one. You have to explain that because now I'm thinking that I'm not going to say anything. You have to explain that to me.
So if I were to hear of a woman who is in a relationship with her husband and everything is great minus the emotional intimacy, and she is going to James, who is a single man, and he just dotes on her, I would view them as more together versus her with her husband. Because there's an intimacy in knowing somebody's in and outs and their triggers and what upsets them and how to calm them down. And I was thinking of you and I thought you were having a bad day, so here's your favorite box of chocolates and the Pink Floyd vinyl. And they're not going out of that way for anybody else in their life. There's that promotion and status. And I think it removes the provision act. But then again, if the wife is withholding sex from the husband, that also removes her provision act as a wife.
Right. So that's why I didn't say anything, because that's where my brain went when you said that.
Yeah.
It is our duty to provide for you, right? Mm-hmm. So my job as a man is to make sure that you have the things that you need and you're safe.
Yeah.
And if one of the things that I need is sexual attention from you, and you refuse to give that to me, are you upholding your duty as a wife?
No.
Why? Why do you believe that? Compared to everyone else on the internet who says that their husband doesn't have a right to their body.
Because the day that we got married, I made a promise to you that we are going to be in a monogamous relationship.
Okay.
And you are not going to be seeking needs that you should get satiated within our marriage elsewhere. And if I'm not willing to provide that, there's a reason for it and we need to figure that out.
Okay.
But you also, in that day of marriage, promised to me that we would figure things out and you're not going to let me sit on the wayside and become a shell of who I am as a woman.
So what if they're not married and they've just been living together for 10 years? Do you still believe that? Like, because that's a decade.
You're not married.
You think that they just call it quits? Like, would that be acceptable?
I think there's a reason that they're not married.
Okay. So you think that as a wife, it's definitely different in that aspect than a live-in girlfriend who's been there for 10 years. Okay.
Yeah. If they're not legally married and they've done the marriage ceremony, I still view that person as a wife and it falls underneath the same standards.
Absolutely.
If these are two people who are boyfriend and girlfriend and that's all that they will ever be, I don't think they have the understanding of what a marriage is and what it truly means to be husband and wife, or wife and wife, husband and husband, however that falls. So yeah, that I would hold that to a different standard.
Okay. So the covenant matters.
It does.
What would you say to people who are like, well, that's not, they don't have a right to my body like that. But then in the event that there's a break-in, the woman expects the man to put his life on the line to keep her and the children safe. How is that any different?
It's not.
Why is it not different?
So.
Because one of them is
Right.
life-shattering. The other one is just sex.
It's not just sex.
I agree.
If you are with somebody and in your marriage it's just sex, you have fucking problems.
Okay.
Fucking problems.
Well, so that speaks on the lack of the actual emotion that is tied to the act.
Right.
Which ties into the other thing that I was talking about earlier about the need for people to express their emotions sexually, right? Because that's how some people say we're tied together in this unity, right?
Right.
Okay. So I did say just sex intentionally, but let's say that one of them is life ending. Mm-hmm. He's supposed to protect her and the children no matter what. But sex is just it's sex.
Well, that's
not life altering.
That's like comparing mental trauma to physical trauma.
How?
There are people out there who would argue that mental trauma has less impact and less value than physical trauma does because you can't see it or it doesn't have a lasting impact. If there is a physical trauma, say that you get into a car accident and it fucks your back up, everyone's going to acknowledge that because they can see how it affects you. Point A to point B, we can trace that.
Right.
If there is a mental trauma, say...
Same car accident, but a TBI, people can't see that.
Right. And then that person that person drinks, right? They're not an alcoholic, but that person tends to drink. And because of the TBI added on top of the alcohol, it's going to affect them differently. Now that person's just labeled an alcoholic. So surface level things, it's just sex. He's not going to die if he doesn't have sex. Long term, he will. His mental state will die. I view that as the mental captivity. And it's also where you place your value. If you don't think that the long-term sustaining of the mental health and the well-being of the person you're with is not important, but say for the last 2 years, your relationship has been absolute shit. You guys are screaming and arguing at each other. You have told him multiple times, I don't love you anymore, and you're threatening to divorce. And then a break-in happens. Why would you expect him to do that?
Would you say that speaks on manipulation?
Yeah. Because we're married.
Okay.
Right. But if you expect him after 2 years of being absolutely shitty to him and telling him I don't love you and you don't fucking matter and you're such a pussy.
Well, that's the manipulation.
That is the manipulation.
They're trying to get him to do something.
Right. But then the night of that break-in, if he doesn't sacrifice his body for his family, he's a piece of shit man. Okay, so flipping that script around, and I lost my train of thought. Never mind.
Yeah, it's good because I have a question. I really didn't want to lose it.
Okay.
You said that what if they put their value in themselves into the act, right? Okay, so let's say, because I immediately thought that there are men out there who work, come home, work some more, and go to bed. They miss out on their children. They miss out on family time. They miss out on holidays because they are doing everything they can to make sure that all ends are met in their home financially. And that's where they put their worth as a human being into being a provider, right? Because that is a thing for men. I can't speak for women. I don't know if that's a thing. I think your provisions look different, but
I agree.
I can't speak on that. But let's say that that's a thing. Knowing that we put our value in that and knowing that we spend our money to make sure that you guys have the things that you need. And in order to not just feel like a paycheck, in order to feel like we matter and to get intimacy and to know that we are still loved, we need a woman to initiate sex with us. Specifically.
Right.
That stops happening. And then we go above and beyond trying to initiate and start saying, hey, like, I have needs that need to be met. Like, you're not holding up. And we're not able to tell you that we become fulfilled and feel like more than a paycheck when we have sex. That is how we feel connected spiritually to you, or however you want to word that. They don't know how to describe that. How does that convey? And what does that, do you think that does to a man's self-worth, knowing that the thing that makes them feel spiritually connected to everyone in the house has now been withdrawn and all he feels like is a caretaker? Have you ever thought about that? I never thought about that until you said that about the value thing. I don't even know if I'm asking you a question. That might have just been a statement.
I think that was just a statement, yeah.
I'm putting shit together as you're talking. So.
Okay. Well, I remember what I was going to say as you were talking. So I said, things have been really rough for 2 years. And she has put him down, said, I don't love you anymore, starting divorce, withholding sex and all these kinds of things. And the night of a break-in expects that man to sacrifice his life for his family and say it's because he's my husband. That same argument can be used for having sex.
Because it's my wife.
Because that's my wife. No matter how shitty the relationship is and no matter what's going on, at the end of the day, you expect that person to lay their life down for you. The same thing can be said when it comes to provision. If you're a stay-at-home wife and you have a husband who was working, you expect him to bring home a paycheck every single day.
And to provide, make sure the bills are paid.
Right.
What do you, oh man, I did not expect this conversation at all to go like this.
No.
What do you think, what do you say about the people who expect it, but there's no emotion behind it and the intimacy is not there and it is just sex?
I would ask them why.
Well, right.
Has it always been that way?
No. What I'm asking you is if you are married for 10 years and you were just doing the act because that's your duty as a wife and your husband needs that release, but there's no intimacy behind it.
From either of them?
It's just sex. It's just a release. Like, what do you say about that? Because at that point, you would have to feel hollow as a wife. If you're just...
Right, you'd have to be neglected. Whether emotionally, physically, with other forms of intimacy.
Do you mean the man or the woman?
The woman. If she's a shell of a woman and she's just a vessel for this man to flop on top of, yes, there has to be some sort of neglect going on towards her that she's feeling, whether it be logical or not. Like, for example, say he goes out every Friday night and has a biker's night with the gang, and he goes riding for 3 hours. And they now have an empty nest. Their last child went off to college and she's home by herself, and now she's really recognizing every Friday night he's not home. She now feels neglected. And that's not something that she's conveyed. And then that can build into that resentment of, I'm now just a shell of a woman. Sex is a chore to me.
Wouldn't you say that that's a her problem?
That would be a her problem.
Because if there's 6 other days in the week for her to do something with herself or to plan date nights, I mean, isn't that really the answer other than feeling empty? And, and what would you say about the man feeling the same way? If the man also feels empty and it's just the act to get the release and there's no emotion behind it, what's the answer to that? Because at that point, are you really in love? Like,
no,
because there's no intimacy in it. If it's just the act, it's just the act.
Yeah, at that point, it's literally just for the release, and that's what one night stands sound like. Could you imagine having a one night stand with the person you're supposed to be married to?
I couldn't imagine the fallout from that. I would imagine that would create a whole lot of mental instability in people after the fact.
Oh, no, I mean like you are with your person and it feels like a one night stand.
Well, yeah, I mean, at that point, that's what I was getting at.
Okay,
though.
Yeah, that's what I
meant.
But
your posed question made it sound to me like, imagine believing you're supposed to be married to somebody and this is your forever person, your soulmate, and you get to fuck them once. The after effect of that. Like,
oh, yeah, no, that's not what
I
meant.
know. Now that you've explained it, but that's how my brain took that. This is why we repeat things.
Yeah.
This is why we have these conversations so that we can be on the same wavelength.
Right.
I don't, but so in that scenario, that whole scenario comes down to you're literally just doing what you're supposed to be doing as your person at that point. Like the intimacy is completely gone. Why bother? Do you think that if that's the case and that's what your marriage feels like, that you should just like step away? Or
I think that there should be conversations. I think that there needs to be conversations about everything. Even if it ends with, okay, then divorce is what we need to do, there needs to be a conversation.
Okay, let's go back to your analogy of the motorcycle guy.
Okay.
What if that Friday night is the only time he ever tries to have sex with her? And because because I thought that's where you were going.
Okay.
I did think that's where you were going. He goes out with the guys, has a couple drinks, rides motorcycles until 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, and comes home and tries to be intimate with his wife.
Okay.
And that's the only time he ever really tries. Because of where I thought that was going in my head, I was like, okay, he's got freedom.
Right. I was thinking decompression. He's not worried about anything in life. He's like, I'm going to go home to my beautiful wife. I'm going to fucking get some. I'm going to sleep good tonight.
Yeah. Tomorrow morning, I got the weekend off. Like, so in my head, that's where I thought you were going and you didn't. And I was like, okay, like, fuck. Now I have to think about something else because this is what I was focusing on.
Yeah.
That says a whole lot too. And in that situation where he's coming home and feeling great and she's not into it and she's only doing her wifely duties, I could see how that could become a problem. But why not try to go?
Right. Be a part of it.
You ever see the t-shirt that says, if you can read this, the bitch fell off? There's a girl shirt that says, the bitch got her own.
Yeah.
Right? So why not get your own motorcycle and go out with them and experience that freedom together and reconnect over something new? And if he doesn't want that and he wants the guy time is his decompression. The riding is his therapy because riding is therapeutic as fuck. And then coming home and feeling that the world is not on my shoulders right now. I have a nice little buzz going because I've had a couple of drinks. The adrenaline of riding my motorcycle with the guys. I feel like a fucking man again. I don't feel like my boss hates me. My mortgage is a fucking problem. My wife hates my guts. My kids have moved out and doesn't return my calls. Like, there's a whole lot of mental that goes into that I could understand from that made up scenario of why you would be interested in having sex that night because you feel good about yourself. That ties into what you said about us putting our value in who we are with sexual activity as men because we do tie our worth of provision to our family. And if we are not getting our needs met and all we're doing is providing, we do view that as a form of slavery, though most men won't say that. They'll say, what am I, just a fucking paycheck? Because they don't know how else to articulate it.
Right.
If a woman is a stay-at-home mom that doesn't have any friends and doesn't have intimacy and doesn't get to go on dates and all she does is cook, clean, and take care of the kids, that slavery feeling feels the same way to them. They just don't want to call it that because slavery is a taboo topic.
Oh, no. Stay-at-home moms will say that.
Do they?
Yeah. I've been called a slave.
Well, yeah, but you've been called a slave from people who want to be offended for you.
Oh.
It's very different than a woman who's actually in that position calling herself a slave.
No. I've seen TikToks from stay-at-home moms.
Yeah?
Yeah.
My TikTok is very weird.
I mean, this was a while ago. I've cultivated a new stream.
My FYP is fucking weird. Like, I don't get anything that I want to watch anymore.
Yeah.
It's the same like 6 things over and over again. And it's always like stitch videos of like trending things. I don't get anything on my FYP of value at all.
Which is wild because a few months ago you were.
I know. Well, I haven't been using my TikTok. Like, I don't give a shit about that.
Yeah.
I think that the switch that I've had towards the way that this might have been the last episode we did, but my viewpoint on all of that has changed. And because of the way I view all of it, I don't scroll the way I used to. And it's not even a matter of I don't want to see the shit. I just don't care. It's illusory. I believe that. Like, none of that shit is real. I don't believe most of the creators that are on there are who they say they are.
I believe that.
And as people are doing skits and like they're hiding their cameras to make videos, it's all bullshit. They were like, hey, we're going to make a TikTok real quick and get some views. And then they act some shit out and post it to the internet. And people are like, oh my God, I would leave him. I would never do that.
Right.
It's no different than the women slamming cabinets while her husband was asleep. That motherfucker wasn't in the house. She wouldn't have been doing that shit while her husband was there. You did that shit for views. This is fake. This is no different than the Jersey Shore or real life MTV, whatever the fuck it was.
Yeah.
They tell you how to act and behave so that you can get views. Now you guys realize you can do it on your own, and you are. I don't have tolerance for that. I would rather read a book.
Yeah.
I would rather have conversations. I'm getting to the point where I'm interacting with people, like conversations on the comment sections. And like with Lee, the photographer in Montana, I actually really want to go hang out with this guy. He seems like a guy I could have a bourbon with and fucking go take pictures and like I'd have a dope ass day. But that conversation started because he made a comment about us coming to Montana and I responded and he responded.
Yeah.
Then I responded, he made a video, then I made a video. And like, it's felt like the evolution of a friendship, right?
Yeah.
Like that's exciting to me. And I want to have real in-depth conversations and you can't do that in 150 characters.
No.
They want that. They want you to be triggered and having massive amounts of engagement because it keeps you on the app.
Yeah, it also makes you dumb down what you're saying in 150 characters.
You have to.
You have to.
Yep. Or you have to make a video about it. And if you make a video about it and you guys start going back and forth and having conversations and videos, it's more engagement. You're on the app longer. You're doing things that makes TikTok more money. I don't know. I don't like what they've done. You can't say link in bio. You can't say link tree. You can't say check out my YouTube. You can't say anything that indicates you leaving the TikTok platform or they shadow ban your account.
Yep.
Every single time we talk about something like that, we'll have a video that's like 200,000 views, 7,000 views, 180,000 views, 3,000 views,
Yep.
because you said link in bio or check this out. And
Yep.
Yeah.
Or web page.
Yep. I think we've exhausted this conversation. Guys, these conversations aren't really meant. Oh, I have to do an intro after we're done, so I'll do that, and you can get up, walk away, and I'll do it.
Okay.
These conversations aren't designed to like really change your world. It's only for her and I to have conversations to try to understand each other better and maybe give you a perspective into our thought process.
And to be thought provoking.
It is to be thought provoking, because sometimes we'll have these conversations and I'll walk away with a different point of view or something that I have to chew on for a little while. And then I get to digest it the way that I perceive the world. And then that could change my entire existence. We don't know. If you guys like these kind of conversations, please tell us in the comments. Let us know that this is something you enjoy and we can do that. With that being said, thank you for tuning in. Remember, guys, you are the author of your own lives.
So grab a pen.
And we will see you on the next one.
Bye, guys.